2 days ago, we were on a field trip to a place called Mercy Farms. My friend and I are the only survivors. We got our permission slips on Monday, and we were all pretty excited. It's not often that we take a field trip before winter break. A few people in my class of 30 whispered amongst themselves. Some people asked our teacher, Mrs. Clearfield, where Mercy Farms was. None of us had ever heard of it. She explained that Mercy Farms is where the juice our school gets is made. She told us that we would be going to see the packaging plant, and at the time, that was enough to get us to settle down. My parents thought that it was a little short notice, getting a permission slip only a few days before the trip. But I didn't care. See, I got hurt during a hockey game and had nothing else to do. So while I wasn't excited to be going to a farm, I was excited to spend the day having at least a little fun. On the day of the field trip, Mrs. Clearfield informed us that we would all be assigned seating partners. I won't lie, I was irritated. I was hoping to sit with a teammate during the trip, but instead I got stuck with Grace Redacted, a football cheerleader who wouldn't give me the time of day if I offered her money. I always got the impression that she thought that she was too good for our small town. The look she gave me when we found out that we would be sitting together was hilarious. But any inkling of wanting to laugh was knocked out of me when I heard our teacher say that the ride was going to be nearly 9 hours. Once we got on the bus, Grace asked me if she could sit on the inside of the seat. I shrugged and let her. At least that way, I could talk to people around me. For a few hours, that was enough for me, but eventually the bus started to settle down, and I turned to watch the window with Grace. We were surrounded by a forest on all sides. As we drove, I swear that we passed maybe 20 different owls. But perhaps it was a trick that the trees were playing on me. Grace was fixated on the window, though. Does this seem weird to you? Grace eventually whispered to me as the forest opened up into a cornfield. Yeah, I said honestly as I heard someone speaking ahead of me. Are we almost there? Ben asked Mrs. Clearfield. We will get there when we get there, Mrs. Clearfield said without any hesitation. Okay, but we have been at it for 5 hours. Can we get a bathroom break? Ben asked, clearly irritated. No, the bus driver said. It was the first time I heard him speak the whole trip. I leaned forward to watch the bus driver in the large mirror that hung over his head. The bus driver had short brown hair and a strong jaw with a small beard. He wore a black uniform with letters on a patch that I couldn't make out. As I watched him in the mirror, his eyes slowly met mine. We made direct eye contact, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I quickly tucked my head back behind the seat and went back to watching the forest with Grace. More of my classmates got antsy though. One of my teammates, Charlie, eventually got up around hour 7. I couldn't believe we had been in this bus for 7 hours straight, driving through corn. I could tell that Grace was getting antsy too, or perhaps she was just uneasy. She squirmed in her seat and tapped her leg around this time. We will be there soon, Charlie. Take a seat and don't get up again or else you will get a 3-month detention. And no, I'm not kidding. Mrs. Clearfield snapped at him. She sounded so angry. Charlie quickly sat down, and I turned to watch the window with Grace. Grace, I whispered to her as I watched one of the scarecrows in the corn. It swayed slowly in the wind. Yeah, she whispered back as she turned to meet me. Her green eyes seemed to be filled with fear and unease. Are you scared? I asked her. Yes, Grace answered honestly. I am too, I said as I looked down at my hands in my jacket. Grace swept her blonde hair behind her ear, and as she did this, something moved behind her. I swear it moved. A scarecrow turned to watch the window. My eyes twitched and my eyes narrowed. I went into fight mode. It's hard to explain just how it made me feel. When Grace turned to see what I was looking at, her eyes widened and she moved to the side, nearly pushing me off the seat. I could hear people whispering about the scarecrows for the next 30 minutes. By the time I looked down at my arm, I noticed Grace holding my sleeve as if I were the only physical object in the bus. By hour 8, I was fed up. Every question, comment, and concern directed at Mrs. Clearfield was met with an increasingly condescending attitude that left a bad taste in my mouth. I had never seen Grace look so anxious. She was bouncing her right leg and fidgeting with her hands. The two girls in the seat next to us were doing similar motions. Why were we all feeling so uneasy? Mrs. Clearfield? I finally got the nerve to ask as I stood up and looked at her from my seat. I could feel my classmates looking at me. The cornfield around us felt all-consuming and endless. Images of the scarecrows flickered in the back of my mind. "Yes, Travis?" Mrs. Clearfield responded without turning her head. "How much longer?" I asked softly. I was trying to keep my attitude hidden, trying to be as respectful as possible. 30 minutes. Mrs. Clearfield responded with a hum. The bus driver looked at me in the mirror again, and I quickly sat down. I was going to say something to Grace, but instead, I watched the scenery around us change. Instead of the cornfield, we were finally seeing buildings. The town looked like something out of an old movie, really vintage. The first building we passed looked like a small grocery store. It had two large M's on the top of it. A sign that said Mercury Mart. I felt my stomach rumble. I hadn't bothered to eat anything the whole trip, but I did have my backpack with me. We were told to bring lunch. I couldn't bring myself to sit down and open it, though. There were smaller houses too. They were kind of pretty in a way. Each one was painted blue, white, and sometimes red or yellow. We passed a black house with a large fence. It caught Grace's attention, and her eyes followed it as we drove by. Next, we passed a movie theater, one like you'd see in old movies. I'll admit it was cool looking. Had a man working the ticket booth in the front and everything. I couldn't make out any of the now playing posters. We passed a diner. The checkered floors looked cool, and honestly, the food smelled amazing. I wanted to leave my seat and tell the bus driver to stop. Finally, we passed a sign that said Camp Mercy Hollows, pointing towards more corn. I wondered if the camp had the same vintage appearance as the rest of the town. As we went further, we drove by an elementary school with various cartoon characters painted on the windows. The paint was faded and looked like it was melting. The way the paint slid down the window made me uneasy. That's when I noticed no other cars were passing us. There was no one on the sidewalk, though I could make out some people in the stores. As soon as we passed the middle school, I felt Grace grab my wrist again. Mercy Middle School, home of the Angels. The building looked mostly run down, and we could see some of the lights on inside, but I couldn't make out anyone inside. The parking lot was empty too. I could see what I assumed to be the high school in the distance. We didn't get close enough for me to see the details. "Travis?" Grace whispered, and I turned to give her my full attention. "I know," I said quickly. I was feeling it too. Something was wrong with this place. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something was wrong. I watched Grace slide her phone out of her pocket and move her thumb quickly. She put the phone to her ear and frowned. "I'm not getting any service." I took mine out and checked. I had no bars. I tried to dial 911 anyway, but the line was completely unresponsive. I must have been looking at my phone for longer than I thought because Mrs. Clearfield broke me out of whatever trance I was in. "We're here," she shouted. She sounded so excited, but my classmates sounded less than thrilled. As I stood up to get off the bus with Grace, I looked out the window one last time. Sitting before us was a large farmhouse that looked like it could be about 3 stories. A red stable sat a few feet away. As we exited the bus, I leaned over to Grace and whispered, "If anything seems off about this, we run right back down the road." She nodded but didn't speak. An older man came walking out of the farmhouse. He had slick back gray hair and wore red overalls with a long-sleeved white shirt underneath. His boots were covered in mud and some other kind of substance that I couldn't make out. Mrs. Clearfield moved her hand up in the same motion she always did during class, signaling us to be quiet. Without any fight, my classmates shut up. "Welcome, kids. Mercy happens to have you. Every few years, we welcome a school that buys our product to visit our humble farm." He continued speaking as I looked around. I didn't see any apple trees or any trees. Did our school serve grape juice? I couldn't remember. I normally brought home lunch. Our farm was first founded in 1630, and ever since, we have been producing world-class juices and steaks. Please follow me to the stable so that I can show you our process, he said with a warm smile as he motioned for our group to follow. As we followed our classmates, I could hear something moving in the corn around us. I figured it was just a bird, but everything around us made me feel uneasy. I think that my body was trying to tell me something, and I know that sounds crazy. The smell coming from the stable was awful, but it didn't smell like manure or anything. Instead, a pungent copper odor wafted out of the barely open doors. I tried to keep my eyes on the chipped white paint that lined the doors. I could hear Grace gag next to me. I turned back to see what Mrs. Clearfield would do. How was she reacting to all of this? Her expression was relatively normal as she ushered everyone into the dark building. If I were going to run now, she would be able to stop me. As soon as the last of my classmates went inside, the doors closed and the lights roared to life. There were no animals in here, and since I wasn't in the front of the group, I couldn't see what was making people back up. Before I could process anything, the whole stable broke out in screams. I was nearly trampled. I took Grace by the arm as quickly as possible and pushed her to the side of the group. The screaming intensified as we moved. It was all-consuming. As soon as we hit the right wall of the building, I could see why. One of my classmates, Tony, I think his name was, stumbled back before his body hit the floor. He had a pitchfork sticking out of his chest. He took 2 small steps back before coughing up some blood. Seconds later, his body fell backward, slamming off the wooden floor. Have you ever been so terrified that you can't breathe? That's how I was feeling. No screaming, no crying. Instead, I felt frozen. I swear I saw my life flash before my eyes. Sasha went down after that. The man who spoke to us prior struck her down with a scythe. It was one swift motion, splitting her neck like it was made out of fresh bread. Blood sprayed out of her like a sprinkler. We have to run. Grace snapped at me as she took my wrist. She didn't have to drag me to get me to follow her. We followed the rest of my classmates to the back of the stable. I swear that I had never moved so fast. As soon as we reached the door and the air hit us, I thought that we were going to get away. If we could just make it back to town, we could call the police. Someone would help us, I was so sure of it. Some people screamed in front of us, the screaming turning into a deep, wet gurgle. The sound you would hear if someone were drowning. We heard a splash, and one of the girls next to us let out a blood-curdling scream. It was unlike anything I had ever heard. My head snapped to the left to see what was going on. She had an arrow sticking out of her shin. Someone was shooting arrows at us. We were not going to get away like this. I had to think fast to buy Grace and me some time. I pushed forward and let the arrows hit my classmates. I felt awful about this, awful enough that I could feel myself crying. It was just a few tears, but as the terror caught up with me, it became harder to hold them back. Eventually, the ground gave out beneath us. I didn't let Grace go. I could feel her hand tighten around my hand. The liquid we fell into wasn't water. We were consumed by a copper smell, and before I knew what was happening, I could taste it. Blood! I poked my head out of the blood pit with Grace, just to get a glimpse of the world outside. I caught a glimpse of someone kicking bodies into the pit. I watched Grace move one of our classmates over to hide under. I grabbed the closest body to copy her, but it wasn't a classmate in my hand. It was Mrs. Clearfield. We sat in the blood pit for what felt like hours. Eventually, I moved Mrs. Clearfield to the side and emerged fully. There was no one around that I could hear, and the sun was raised higher than it was when we fell in. The smell that consumed me made me want to puke, though I knew that if we made too much noise, we would be killed. I slowly reached out of the pit and dragged myself out. Again, I had to fight puking, so I turned my head to help Grace out of the pit. The image of my dead classmates will forever be burned into my mind. I could feel it again, tears barely pushing down my cheeks. The blood on my face felt like it was holding my tears in place. Grace pushed her head out of the blood, fully, and her blonde hair was nearly unrecognizable. Her whole appearance felt like it had changed. The blood poured off her face, barely sticking to her skin and hair. As soon as her face came out fully, I could tell that she had been crying too. I reached forward to take her hand, as we had done so many times today. As I took her hand, I could hear a door swing open and slam shut. I pulled her out so quickly that I thought that I might break her arm or something. "Stop!" a woman screamed at us. I tilted my head up and watched as the woman came sprinting across the field. I felt frozen, like my legs had stopped working. I could feel my body start shaking, my lip quivered, and my eye twitched. This was it, I thought. This is how I die. "Run!" Grace screamed as she tugged me, willing me to move. I turned and ran with her, with no other choice. We went running right into the cornfield. "The town should be this way," I screamed as I tried to get us to run towards the road. That's when I heard it. The corn was rustling. Someone was behind us. I couldn't help but let out a scream. I could hear Grace panting as we ran. No matter how fast we pumped our arms, we couldn't speed up. I heard whatever it was getting closer, and that's when I felt it. Pain. Visceral, blood-chilling, heart-stopping pain. Blood ran down my back, and my legs buckled. I let out a scream so loud I knew everyone and everything in the area would be on us. Grace turned around, and I watched as her face turned pale as snow. Even caked in blood, I could see the terror she was wearing. I quickly turned around and involuntarily cocked my head. I was expecting to see a person, but this was no man. It was a scarecrow, its face elongated. The sack that it wore on its head became outstretched in a horrifying grimace. Hay stuck out of its arms and legs. Its right arm dripped with my blood. It had lashed me. The checkered shirt the creature was wearing was caked in dry blood. Its jeans were tattered, so we could see it was completely made of hay. I screamed and slammed my leg into the monster before scurrying to my feet. "Run faster!" I screamed to Grace as we pushed through the corn. My heart was beating so fast that I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Monsters aren't real, I kept trying to tell myself. But that wasn't true. They're real, and one is going to kill us. I turned my head back a little to see if it was gaining on us. The scarecrow ran with its legs going as high as possible. Its arms pumped with such power that I was surprised that there wasn't a human inside the suit. "Grace! It's picking up speed!" I screamed in horror. "Crap!" Grace gasped. She was running out of breath. I could hear it, and before I could reach over to help her, the scarecrow slammed into her back with enough force to send her flying forward. I reached my hand forward to catch her and found myself tripping and falling, landing on concrete. Sweet, beautiful concrete. I pulled my scraped, bloody hands from the concrete and looked at Grace. She had slammed right into a parked car. Fresh blood pooled from her nose, and tears streamed from her eyes. Seeing her cry, it made me mad. My hands moved before my body could process what was going on. I turned quickly and saw the scarecrow looming from the edge of the corn. It's barely peeking out amongst the long stalks. Its expression slowly turned to that of a normal scarecrow. "Grace, come on, it's not following us." I gasped as I forced myself to my feet and took her by her arm. "Okay," Grace exhaled as she held her nose for a second. If I knew how to hotwire a car, I would have, but we had to run down the street. We were slower now, though, and I was limping. My whole body trembled, shaken with terror unlike anything that I had ever felt. I listened to Grace sob for about 20 minutes before she gasped, and we continued down the street. Eventually, we found ourselves at the diner we had passed. I figured that we had cut through the corn faster than I thought. "Excuse me?" I gasped as I limped over to the counter. People around us were staring at us, some in shock and some in disgust. "Ma'am?" I asked the red-headed woman in front of me. Her hair was done up tight, and she wore a blue shirt and white apron. Her makeup was very bright, and for whatever reason, she didn't seem bothered. "We need the police," I started to say as I felt a hand rest on my shoulder. "Come with me," an older man wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a sheriff's jacket said to me. I was so happy to see some police. "Sir, there has been a murder," Grace started to say as we sat in the booth. She groaned and coughed a little. When I sat down, pain shot through my back and into my legs. I couldn't help but whimper. My hands were still trembling. "I know. I was informed about an outside bus arriving in town a little too late. You might have noticed that there is no police force here, and well, that's because Mercy was once a pit-stop town. No help is coming for your friends," he said seriously as he reached into his pocket. I watched tears slide down Grace's face. It felt like I couldn't breathe. "You can call for more police," I hissed, a little too loudly. Why didn't anyone around us see how serious this was? Everyone was acting so normal. "No, I can't. Listen to me carefully. Mercy is not a normal town, and while I would love to give you the details, there's no time for that," he said as he put $600 on the table. "That is for food, water, and a place to stay. When you get home, it is unlikely that anyone will remember you existed. Don't come back here." He rose from his seat. "I have another case. Sit on the bench out front and catch the bus," the man said as he exited the diner and walked towards his car. I finally let myself cry. My body was at its breaking point, and any bravado I had was gone. Fear overtook me, and I sat there for a minute sobbing, trying to catch my breath. The woman behind the counter eventually brought us each a glass of water and left it at that. I gulped down the glass and grabbed the cash before forcing my sore body to its feet. "We have to go," I whimpered to Grace, once again offering her my hand. "Yeah, we have to go," Grace whispered and took my hand. We walked to the bus stop together and slowly sat down. The bus came in a few minutes, and it was surprisingly fast. A kind old man wearing a black suit and black hat greeted us as we got on the bus. As soon as we were out of the corn, I pulled my phone out and wrote this down. "I have no idea where we are going. I'm pretty sure fear is the only thing keeping me moving at this point. If you find yourself at Mercy, just turn around and go home." I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share, and subscribe the channel Mark Stories.